Purim, of course, is the holiday that's talked about in the Bible in in the book of Esther, meaning the star. Oh, I got a lot on that. Well, I tell you, that's a secret Babylonian text. Now, some people say, well, it shouldn't even be in our Bible, the book of Esther. If it's a Babylonian text, and if it reveals secrets about prophecy in the last days, and it does, it doesn't deserve to be in the Bible. Well, I don't say what deserves to be in the Bible, but I know that God wanted it to be in the Bible. God wanted every book to be in the Bible. And it is there. And it's very instructive. I think God wanted us to know things. That's why I put it in the Bible. But Purim was very important. And of course, the first Purim was by Queen Esther and her crooked kin named Mordecai, which comes from the Babylonian name of Marduk, the god Marduk. And of course, Esther comes from Hadassah, or from a star, the star goddess. So that's why I say it has a secret meaning. Of course, the story is all about their little battle with a man who was the king's, he was the vice regent, he was the head of the country, of the king of Persia, and he wanted to kill all the Jews in his land, or in the kingdom, you might say. Haman was his name, Haman. So Haman, though, lost out to Esther and to her kin, whose name was Mordecai, or Marduk. And the king, Ahasuerus, put Haman on the gallows and hung him. Of course, that wasn't enough for bloodthirsty Esther. She wanted the king, and she got permission to take all of his, 10 sons, and hang them too. And that wasn't enough, so she brought, she didn't bury them right away. She transported the dead bodies after the hanging of the 10 sons of Haman back to the capital of Susanna, and she hung them again. Now, that's pretty bloodthirsty when the 10 sons, we don't know that they did anything wrong. They just happened to be the sons of Haman, and they were hung twice. You can't get your revenge out of just hanging them once, so you got to have a spectacle in the capital city. It's like somebody was hung in Tupelo, Mississippi, or maybe Miami, Florida, or Houston, Texas. And then the country was so mad at them, or the leader was so mad at them, that after they were hanging in Miami or Houston, they brought their bodies to Washington, D.C. and hung them again. And then she went on to kill most of the people at the, 500 of the servants that she had in the royal court there. 500, I believe it was. And then she went on and they killed 75,000 other Persian and other peoples who would not, let's just say, bow down to the Jews. That was a massacre. And the Jewish kids celebrate that massacre to this day. They have a big celebration every year. It's usually in April, about sometime in March. And the kids are given little cookies. And they're shaped in the form of Haman. And when the kids are told to chomp down on those cookies, eat the face off of Haman, eat his body, just like that, in the synagogues. It's a pretty grotesque festival, but then everyone gets drunk and all kind of things happen in the synagogues. Now, if you don't believe me, you can look it up for yourself. But on Purim, that holy day or festival day, the Jews, the rule is, this is literally their rule. Their rabbis teach them that all the men must go out and get drunk this day. Be so drunk that they don't even know who they are. They can't even recognize. They could be Haman It says, so drunk they might even be humming and not even realize it. Well, I've never known of a religion that tells everybody on a certain day to all the men to go out and get drunk and all the kids to eat a little cookie and imagine that it's Haman. They actually call it Hamantaschen, which means the flesh of Haman. They're like cannibals. Now, I know a lot of you won't believe this. That's because you haven't studied it. Just study it a little bit. But Purim, by the way, in the Bible, they have this day and it's commemorated every year. And every year, too, in the Jewish religion, all the rabbis get together and they name a Haman of the year, the most evil man on earth. I understand that Saddam Hussein was twice Haman of the year. That is, before the United States put a noose around his neck and hung him for the Jews. Well, I was reading the Jerusalem Post recently, and an article stuck up and sort of, slapped me in the face, and it said, Purim 1953, Jews in the Communist Empire. Well, naturally, I had to read that. Very long article by two Jews, of course, Yosef Begin and Larry Pfeffer. And it says that Stalin turned against the Jews. Stalin, the Russian dictator, was himself a Jew, many people believe, but he didn't want to share power with the Jews. He wanted to be the supreme power himself. So beginning, of course, the revolution, the Communist Revolution was in 1917. Now, when he took power in the late 20s, when Vladimir Lenin, who was a Jew, died, he pretended that he loved the Jews, but he stealthily rooted them out. He began to root many out. At first, of course, he gave all the praise to the Jews because Jews were in control of everything in communism. They ran everything. They massacred Christians left and right. They burned down churches. They turned churches into whorehouses. It was pitiful. But beginning in 1938, Stalin said, you know what? I'll never be a complete dictator until I get rid of all the Jews. So he began to arrest the Jews. And his purging of the Jews went on until his death, which was on 1 March 1953. Now that date is very significant. That was Purim. When the Jews get their revenge over Haman and all of his people. You know, the Jewish Talmud, their holy book, says, quote, the best of the Gentiles kill. Someday, if they gain power over all the world, full power, now they've got power, but it's not full. If they get control, there will be a Purim Day, a festival, in which all of the Gentiles who still worship Jesus will be murdered. I can safely prophesy that. They will be murdered. You, me, every Gentile in the world who holds fast to the truth of Jesus Christ will be slaughtered. Now, and it will happen on Purim. They will make sure. In this article, as I was reading, they're talking about how Stalin began to get really vicious against the Jews. And Stalin even created a fiction that there were 12 Jewish doctors who were his doctors, by the way. But he said they were all conspiring to kill him. A Jewish doctor's plot. And he had them all arrested. And, they all confessed. But then everybody that was brought in by the communists, the KGB, confessed. When you have your fingernails torn out and a branding iron is put on your back and under your feet, when you're beaten, tortured, you usually confess. He got them to confess. And then suddenly, well, let's listen to what he says. The Soviet Haman, he's talking about Stalin, This is an article in Jerusalem Post calling Stalin a Haman. The Soviet Haman, a pharaoh of our time, who had planned another major program against Jews, collapsed on March 1, 1953. In a symbolic and miraculous way, that day coincided with a joyous Jewish holiday and entered Jewish history as Purim 1953. He goes on to say that apparently there was a conspiracy against Stalin and his death was not peaceful. He suggests that in this article, these two co-authors suggest that Stalin was murdered by the Jews, who, like Mordecai and Esther, saved the Jews of the Soviet Union, of whom there were some 3 million Jews. Now, it's interesting that, according to this article in the Jerusalem Post, Stalin had already signed an order that had not yet gone into effect, that on Purim Day of 1953, that is March 1, 1953, all the Jews in the Soviet Union would be rounded up and taken away to Siberia and to other places. All the Jews in the Soviet Union were to be arrested. A great purging of the Soviet Union and a murderous campaign against the Jews was to commence on Purim Day, March 1, 1953. The order was signed and given to Levente Baria, the head of the secret police, the KGB, a bloody man, a bloody monster of a man. But the Jews intervened and were able to overthrow and murder Stalin. He died on March 1, 1953. The very day he had ordered that all the Jews be rounded up, he himself evidently was poisoned. Now, the official report was that he had a brain hemorrhage. But we do know from many books I've read that he lay on his bed for days, dying, before they even brought a doctor in to help save him. Well, hey, by the way, when we read about the lives of such men as Joseph Stalin, here was a man who was a Jew, was married to a Jewish woman, had always favored the Jews. His deputy, Kaganovich, was a Jew. But he himself determined that he would kill all the Jews. He would bring judgment against them. And, of course, he created all these show trials in the Soviet Union. And many of the Jews were arrested beginning in 1938. Until 1938, they ran everything, all the Jews. They were the conquerors of the poor Russian Gentiles and Christians. But beginning in 1938, they met up with a harsh man in Stalin. And, of course, when Stalin, with, Churchill and Roosevelt's help, won World War II, he became a hero to the Soviet Union people and to the Russians. He's the one that conquered the German Nazis. He gained more and more power. And after World War II, the Jews still control most of the Soviet Union and certainly Eastern Europe. But he began to chop away at them so that by 1953 he felt like he was able to arrest every Jew, every single Jew, all 3 million, and take them away. You say, 3 million? That's a lot of people he was going to purge and arrest and take away, put in prison camps or just out and out murder them. Well, the Black Book of Communism, published by Harvard Press, says 94 million citizens of the Soviet Union lost their life during the communist years. 94 million. Solzhenitsyn says it was at least 66 million. 3 million more? That's piker stuff.